Good morning, students. Today in your history class we are going to start a new chapter. That's a very interesting chapter, that is Mesopotamian civilization. As we have learned about different types of civilizations like Egyptian civilizations, then you had which other civilizations, uh, Indus Valley, then you had Chinese civilization. You will be learning in future, but right now what we have to learn, that is your Mesopotamian civilization. Okay, now in this chapter, after completing this chapter, you will get an idea, or you will understand the origin and extent of the Mesopotamian civilization and its contribution in the field of art of writing, craft, architecture, science and astronomy. And the things or the topic which you have to study in this chapter is Mesopotamian civilization, origin and extent, Hammurabi's code of laws, art and crafts, science and astronomy, decline of the civilization. So without wasting the time, let's start our class. Okay, now the first what we have to study is about the Mesopotamian civilization, origin and extent, how and when it's originated and how it is extended. Okay, the civilization flourished between the two rivers named Tigris and Euphrates in Southwest Asia. And the word Mesopotamia, they have name is derived from the two Greek words Meso and Potamia, and the combination of Mesopotamia means the land between the rivers. So you can very well understand that Mesopotamian is the land between the two rivers Tigris and Euphrates. That's why it got its name Mesopotamia. Okay, now the land between this river is called the fertile crescent of the world because of its fertility, and you can understand it is fertile because of its availability of water on the both the sides. Okay, and the Mesopotamia right now in today's modern day, the countries of Iraq, Asia, Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, among others, this was the place in past it was known as Mesopotamian civilization. Okay, and ancient Mesopotamian is often called the cradle of civilization as people first settled in villages and towns. So the first settled villages and town where the people have settled, it was known as cradle of civilization. Okay, you might have heard this term in your previous history classes or in junior classes somewhere. Now, the people who first settled down in this civilization or in these places were known as Sumerians. Okay, and the were people Sumerians, but there were many people settling here. Important of them were the Babylonians and Assyrians. Okay, so there were three kind of group of people settled in the civilization. There was Sumerian, Babylonian and Assyrian, but the Babylonians and Assyrians were the important among these three. Now the Babylonians, they built on the top of remains of some of the cities of Sumer. Okay, and the Assyrians, they lived to the north of the Babylonians, and they flourished one after the other between 3500 and 612 BCE. Okay, so this was the origin and extent of this civilization. Now we will be looking into the society of this civilization. Now the society of Sumer and Babylon was divided into four classes, and those four classes were priest, upper class, lower class and slaves. Now the priest, kings and the officials, administrative officials, they all were known as the upper class. They came under the upper class. Okay, and the king and officials and this priest, they were very powerful and they were the most important part of this society. Okay, and next, you know that as it's a king, officials, now they have a very power also and they are very important also. So it's quite obvious that they led a life full of luxury in the beautiful palaces. Both men and women wore jewelry and beautiful attire. Attire means clothes. Okay, and the next class were the war prisoners. Those were under the class of slaves. Okay, and as they were the slaves, they were leading a miserable life. And the next was the Sumerian society was partial. Now partial means that this was the basic unit of the society, and as they were partial in nature, so the women were not considered equal to men. they had restricted rights, okay, and they could not own the land, but they were allowed to vote. Hence they had no vote in making the laws. So the laws which were made in the city, the women had no right to make any their voice anything in that laws, okay. And the girls were even not sent to the schools for education, but however they were allowed to study at homes but not in the schools. And the girls were also learned dancing and singing. So this was a partiality between in the Sumerian society between the men and the women, okay. The next thing which we are going to look into the society or into the Mesopotamian civilization is settlement and the town planning. How was they were having their town planning. Now, early settlers in the Mesopotamian started to gather in small villages and towns. Yes, so they learned how to irrigate land. As they are numbered in people, they need food. So they learned how to irrigate land, grow crops on the large farm. The towns grew bigger. Okay, eventually the towns became large city, which formed the core of the city states, and smaller towns were under the authority of the larger city. So each Sumerian city formed its own city stage. Okay, it means that the towns grew bigger and became the small city. So the first there was the formation of village. Now the many villages combined and they formed the towns. Now many towns combined and they formed the city. So from village to town and from town to city, this was the settlements made the growing of this Mesopotamian civilization. And the cities had strong mud wall with the guarded gates. Okay, they were enclosed by a strong mud or the big brick wall with the guarded gate. And the most of the people lived in mud brick and with flat roofs. Even many people they prefer to sleep on the roofs during the summers. As nowadays also you find people sleeping on the roof because due to the heat they want something to be cooled off, so they'll try to sleep on the roofs. Even in the Mesopotamian civilization, people were doing this. Now, the houses they had of 2 or 3 levels, and the type of bricks were not durable, and the houses were periodically raised and rebuilt on the same higher ground. So, eventually, when they were gradually, slowly, they started making their houses, raised it rather one after the other, as you can see nowadays. Now, the Mesopotamian cities were built around the temples. So, the cities had the granaries, storehouse, and administrative buildings and dwellings. Okay. Now, the royal palaces also came up as a magnificent temples in the cities. Wide streets connected the central area of the city gates, and the houses were away from the common spaces. And the royal houses and the mud houses of common people were built together with narrow passage. So it was kind of a planned city, okay, which had a proper streets, drainage system. Okay, so the society was comparatively like kind of ours. Now let us look at the occupation the people had. The main occupation of Mesopotamian people was the agriculture, as they had the fertile land. Now, why they had the fertile land? You know that the land was between the two rivers. Which two rivers? Tigris and Euphrates. So, obviously the land was very fertile and appropriate for the agriculture, for growing the crops. Okay, and the water facility was also available for them from the rivers, and it was very good for the irrigation. Now, good means of irrigation led to an increase in the agriculture products. So as they were easily agriculture, the availability of water was available, so the crops they can grow had an increment. Like they started growing with one crop, then they added with another, then they added with another. So this way gradually they have started producing many crops like such a wheat, pulses, barley, fruits and vegetables. So they kept on adding the things in the agriculture. So after the agriculture they even did the domestication of animals. Now they domesticated which animals? Cow, goats, and sheep. Even the animals like beast of burden were also tamed. Now the animals in beast and burden means, children, those group of animals which are helpful for human, like for transportation, for carrying the goods. Okay, example, donkey, oxen. Okay, these are the beast of burden. Okay, apart from this agriculture domestication, they had the occupations like goldsmith, blacksmiths, weavers, and potters. So kindly the people were involved in lot of kind of the occupations. Okay, now after the occupation, they have grown the crops and things. Now they need to learn the trade. So now we will look into the trade, how they have utilized their occupations into and converted the occupations into the trade. Okay, now the Mesopotamian, they lacked useful resources such as stone for building, precious metals, and timber. Okay, but Mesopotamian merchants developed trade with Syria and Asia Minor, now in Turkey. This Minor Asia, it's Turkey right now in the west, and Iran in Indus Valley in the east. Okay, now different modes of transport such as land and water transport were used to trade different types of goods. Obviously, if they have to supply their goods from one place to another, they need to take the help of some mode of transport. Like in the land, they used to take use of oxen, caravans, donkeys, camel, and in the water transport, the ships and all those were used for transporting of goods. Now, the trade was based on barter system, as metal coinage was not into use. It was there in the civilization, but it was not used. But barter system was used for trading. And what is the barter system? Exchanging of goods from one to another. Like if I have something, I'll give to you, and in exchange I'll take your things and I'll use. Okay, this is the barter system. This was the trade. Now after the occupation, trade is done. Now we will be looking into the religious belief of the people. First, the Sumerians. These were the first settled people in the Mesopotamian civilization. The Sumerians, they worshipped many gods and goddesses, such as God of Heaven, Enlil. This were the bracket names, are the name given by the people of those time. Okay, and to clarify which god they believe, we have described over here. Okay, so the God of Heaven was called Enlil. Wind and storm god was called Enlil. Earth god was called Nuharsank. Mountain god was Uli. Sun god Samas. Goddess of fertility is Tar. Okay, so these were the gods which they worshipped. Now people believe that God lived on mountain tops. So every city had a ziggurat. Now what is this ziggurat? I'll show you the picture of it. Now, can you see this picture? This is the ziggurat of Earth. That means a place at the top of the city, as they believe that the god was at the top. So they made the ziggurat at the top of the city so that people can go and offers their offerings. And it was higher than all the buildings in the area and could be seen from far off. That means this ziggurat was at the top, and it was could be seen from the far, and people like the old people who could not go there, but from the down they can see and they can worship. Okay, now the offerings were made in the temples, such as several purposes like observation of to study stars and planets by the astrologers. They used these places. Okay, they also served as the center of education and as a place of trade and commerce. So the Sumerian believed in rebirth. As do you remember, in Egyptian civilization people believed in rebirth. Same here, the Mesopotamian civilization people also believed in the rebirth. Okay, now after the religious beliefs, we will come to the Hammurabi's god of law. Now who is this Hammurabi? Hammurabi, he conquered the whole area of Mesopotamia and established the empire of Babylon. Now he was kind of a king or during the time of the Mesopotamian civilization and the empire. He was the king of the empire called Babylon. He was a great lawgiver who prepared the first code of laws. Okay, so he was the one who prepared the first rule of laws, which is known as Hammurabi's code of law, and it is the oldest recorded law in the world because it was the first law. That's why it is the oldest law which has to be recorded right now. So what were the features or what was the characteristics of his laws are given here. It has been preserved in writing. So at that time there was no typing, nothing, so it is preserved in writing. It deals with the court procedure, punishment for crimes and injuries. It fixed wages for the labor, defined marriage, and safeguarded the rights of women. As I have told you before also, children, that the society was partial for the women, so he was the one who made the safeguarded the rights of the women. It established on efficient system administration in Babylonian. So kind of arrival of Hammurabi's made the society more perfect, isn't it? Okay, and it set in divinely inspired laws that was origin to concept of eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. So he was quite very strict regarding his laws and everyone has to follow it. Now after his code of law, we will be looking into the great contribution of Mesopotamian was the art of writing. Okay, it is one of the greatest contribution in the world in the invention was of writing. It allows transmission of knowledge, codification of laws and records of facilitated trade and farming. So writing system began with sign drawn on clay tablets. Now you remember what is clay tablets? I'll show you. See, this is the clay tablet. Can you see these pictures over here? This all means something. Each picture depicts something. So this is the kind of tablet they make, and it all was the sign language which they knew, and they could understand what is written over here, what is the message given in this K tablet. Okay, and this tablet was referred to as pictography script. Okay, as you can see, it is of pictures, so that's why it is referred to the pictography script. It is at this juncture that the signs became wedge shaped and came to be known as the cuneiform script, and it emerged in the Sumerian civilization. So the Sumerians, they wrote on the wet clay blocks with a stylus. Stylus is a kind of a pen used for writing. Okay, and then dried those in the sun to make a tablet. And most of the tablets had government and financial records. Some of the writings include Mesopotamian gods, their heroes, poetry, and songs. So it is one of the most important. Now, children, after this, we will also see the epics. Now, before that, Henry Rawlinson deprived the language and translated it into English. Now, he was the one who translated the Mesopotamian sign language into the language English, which is known to everyone. So that nowadays we can come to know what they have written and what it all. Due to this, the conversion of English, we can make it out that it was a government documents, financial documents, only because after his conversion of those languages into English. Now the epic of Gilgamesh is often regarded as the earliest surviving great works of literature. Okay, and children, it is the one of the most important epic poems recorded in history, which is written more than 4,000 years ago. Now you can also read this blue boxes. This they give you an extra information like the King Gilgamesh ruled Sumerian Uruk, modern day Iraq. Okay, so as he was the one who wrote the epic and was also ruling the Sumerian. Okay, now after the writing of art and everything done, now we will come to the architecture. the construction done by them. Okay. Now, Mesopotamian constructed building palaces, canals, dams, and dukes. So they were specialized, or they have developed their construction in all the areas. Okay, and the Sumerian architecture had fully developed and evolved. They had begun the manufacture of unbaked bricks, and these bricks were used in the foundation and the exterior of important buildings. Okay. Now each city had a ziggurat to towered temple dedicated to city god. So each city had this ziggurat. Do you remember I have shown you this? So they were like a temple dedicated to the city god. The most famous ziggurat is the Tower of Babel. Okay. Now this Babylonian, they have this Babylonian king, rather, he built the famous hanging garden of Babylon for his wife. This rooftop garden is regarded as one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. Not now, it's written Asian world. Right now, the seven wonders are different, but in the early, the ancient time, this garden was considered in one of the seven wonders also. So you can understand that the construction was such a marvelous that it could be added in those seven wonders. Okay, and their Mesopotamian constructions, building palaces, canal, dam, dukes, and this was fully developed in 3000 BC. Okay. Now, after the architecture, we will look into the science and astronomy. That means they have touched each and every field. They have not even left anything. They were so talented and intelligent people. Now, in science and astronomy, the Mesopotamians were skilled mathematicians. So, they had a very good brain. So, they adopted the sexagesimal mathematical system, and the system had a 60 was thus an important number in the system of numerals. In this mathematical system, the number which was very important was the 60, and that is why they have divided an hour into 60 minutes and a minute into 60 seconds, which is till today we are following it, isn't? We divide the hour into 60 minutes and a minute into 60 seconds. As the 60 was important, so you will find 60 in most of the inventions. And they have divided the circle into 360 degree, which is followed still today. Okay, and even today you know that we are following it. Now they had a well defined weight system which was used by the Mesopotamian. In it, a unit was called mina, which was equal to 60 shekels, while 60 minas made a talent. Okay. Now, after the mathematics, they came and they had a new calendar, was called the New Babylonian calendar. And children, in this calendar, they had 12 years, which is still followed today. And do you remember we have one extra day in the Feb, that is 29th in every fourth year, that is your leap year, we have one day extra. And this thing was being done there also. They added an extra month to a year at irregular intervals to bring into harmony with the solar time. Okay, and that 1 month anyhow calculated and done, and it's been according to Hindu month names. Like for English we have only 12 January to December, but according to the Hindu names we still have 1 month extra. Okay, you can ask to your grandparents about this. Now the last, decline of the civilization. Now the civilization, everything has an end, children. Every beginning has an end in the universe, isn't it? So even this civilization came to an end, and the reasons which were told behind the decline of the civilization was spread of an epidemic, false irrigation methods, a situation of chaos and confusion, and invention of Hittites. These all were the responsible for the downfall or the decline of the Mesopotamian civilization. Okay. Now this is what your chapter is all about. If you have any doubts, any queries, you are free to ask me. Okay, thank you.